Okay, and welcome back to the Natural Awakening podcast with me, your host, Wiston. And today I am delighted to welcome Mark Sando, Roshi, and Stephen Snyder, Sensei. I'm not sure if I got the order of those titles and names correctly, but now's the time for you to introduce yourselves. Mark, why don't you go first?
Thank
Maybe
you.
tell people a little bit about who you are, where you're coming from in training, just to provide a kind of context for the conversation to follow about Kōan and Zen.
Sure. Yeah, that's all good. So I guess we always have to do this. I've been practicing how many years? Well over 40, I guess. And I trained 20 years at Zen Mountain Monastery. I was a lay student, so I would go for session and then come home. So I trained 20 years with Daido Roshi, who was my root teacher, I guess you would say. And actually, I should back up. I was raised in two traditions, the Catholic tradition and Jewish tradition. My parents obviously were a mixed marriage back in the day. And so I had one teacher who was very, very important to me, Sister Eileen Story, who was a sister of mercy. And she helped me through my early exposure to the Catholic mystics, St. John of the Cross and the like. Bernadette Roberts, of course, who's a modern awakened master. And I wouldn't say I felt like I trained with Sister Eileen for quite a while, um, going to mass every day, that kind of thing, but also really at this deep prayer and deep meditation, and had quite a powerful opening with her. And then Bernadette Roberts was a guiding light. And when I came to Zen, I just sort of saw a quote from Daido that was in the newspaper. These mountains and rivers of the present are the actualization of the way of the ancient Buddhas, and that's from Dogen. And so I was really drawn. And as soon as I met Daido, I realized he was my teacher now. And so I spent 20 years with him until he started to get ill, and he didn't pass that long afterwards. And I went to his Dharma brother, Bernie Glassman Roshi, and I completed Koan study with Bernie Roshi. And then I spent about a solid 10 years just in quiet contemplation. I didn't choose to teach. And I would go see Francis Lucille, who's a very prominent, truly enlightened uh, invited teacher out on the West Coast. And so I would go see him, and I found that very helpful. And then I met Stephen about 3 years ago, and that was another, to me, mind-to-mind transmission that happened probably the first time we ever spoke. And we've been together ever since. So that's my background, I guess.
Well, thank you
I'll,
for sharing. Yeah,
I'll,
I
I'll add
spent
one
13 months at
thing.
Zen Mountain last year, so it's good to meet another person with such a rich background there. Stephen, jump in. Sorry.
I was just going to say the one thing that we'll add for Sando Roshi is that he did Dharma transmission with Bernie Roshi, so that's the lineage basis for our connection to the lineage.
Oh yeah, that's what I meant by I completed my training with him. And then
Right.
a couple of my senior Dharma brothers, and also in the White Plum in the Maizumi Roshi's lineage, you know, gave me Inca a few years ago. So I became a Roshi at that point.
And for people who don't know, I imagine plenty of people watching this won't know what that means. What is Inka Shome? Maybe a little bit about the lineage background, just for people's interest. Briefly.
Well,
Who was Maizumi Roshi? How did he come over? What's his background?
oh, sure. So, well, Maizumi Roshi was one of the first masters to come from Japan. I think he came in about 1959 or 60, so very early. Uh, and he is a very young monk, and he was bringing the Zen teachings first to the West Coast. Suzuki Roshi had brought them to San Francisco. Maizumi was in the L.A., and that's where Bernie Glassman and John Daidalori Roshi and others first encountered the teachings themselves. They all became students of Maizumi. Um, and he was a very powerful teacher. I think he also was somewhat of a controversial figure. in many ways. But he brought a discipline to the teachings that you have to ascribe to the Japanese root of it. Um, and we'll talk about that further. But the Japanese training, very intensive, lots of sitting, very sharp koan practice, meaning you're asked to take a particular fragment of the teaching that may have been recorded, 1,000 years ago, and become that teaching, show it, and the way it's taught, it isn't. I'll quote Daido Roshi, right? Don't tell me, show me. It's that hard, right? It's right here now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a tough
Yep.
teaching, right? And so, and yet he would be, Daido was to me always the kindest of, he would say he's a kind grandparent, grandmotherly kindness.
Yeah.
And when Maizumi Roshi passed, Bernie Glassman, then Tetsugen became the head of the order, the White Pluma Sangha. It now has like 220 teachers in it, but at the time he was the first successor. Daido Roshi was the third successor. So it was kind of natural that I would go teach. I would go study with Bernie. I was glad he took me in after a certain period. And it's koan practice, which is you have to be the thing itself. You can't. It's not an intellectual exercise at all. Or we can get trapped in that, but you have to really be it, and show it, manifest it, and that's what makes it Zen or Chan. It's right here now, man. Right, and
Nowhere else.
Yeah, and it's a life's work, right? It's not over. It's not over. Like I passed 700 koans. That's only getting you ready for the really deep practice, which is living your life without any of those structures, without having anything to hold on to. Is that helpful?
A deep and severe training. Yes, very. Yeah. That you addressed, jumped ahead a little in my scheduled programming, which is great. I'm glad you did.
I want to make sure
no.
Mugen Sensei gets his introduction, because this is a serious teacher you have on this show.
Yep. All right, Stephen, why don't you, for those who aren't familiar already, some of the
Sure.
audience will be, but
Yeah, I sort of began my spiritual journey when I was about 13. I stumbled on the first book that Carlos Castaneda did, called something like The Yaqui Way of Knowledge. And it was his PhD thesis in anthropology from UCLA. He communicated that he had studied or apprenticed with a shaman in the deserts and mountains of Mexico, and then wrote about it. And of course, a lot of it was about taking various psychedelics, peyote and others. And for me, it wasn't so much the drugs that were interesting, but it was the idea of a separate reality, a reality that was different than what I call consensual reality. So even at that young age, something sparked in me that I could tell there was a truth behind it. And I didn't know much more than that. I was raised Christian, and I liked Jesus an awful lot as a kid, but I wasn't so keen on the priests and the ceremony, particularly after one of the priests hit on me. That kind of discouraged my participation. But I really liked the idea of all that. And so later, when I was about 19, going through the usual teenage angst, I was living in San Francisco and went and got a book out of the library. They had, like, I think 1 or 2 books in English on Buddhism, and it was an overview book. And I read all the different traditions, the different lineages, or I guess traditions, and really resonated with the Zen a lot. It was so familiar, and I really had the sense of being home. And so I ended up shortly thereafter, 3 Pillars of Zen either came out or I got access to it. And so I began counting breaths, which is what Kapla Roshi recommended in that book. So I spent 2 years counting breaths, and I could only sit for about 5 minutes when I first started sitting. My psychology couldn't stand longer than that, but I could tell something important happened. I could tell I was grounded in a way I'd never been before. And same thing, the first time I sat, which was for 5 minutes, I said, I'm home, and I knew I'd be doing this for the rest of my life. So it started there. And in those days, I mean, this was in the 70s, it was not easy to find teachers. I went up to San Francisco Zen Center. At the time, they reminded me a lot of Christian high church. Lots of incense, lots of fancy robes, bowing, and I really was not very interested in that. So I think I was more aligned with the Chan, and sort of practicing apprenticing with a small group in the mountains was sort of more appealing to me. So, but I did end up working with different teachers and dabbled in koans over the years with the Sensei and the Korean Zen folks, and with some other teachers, Henry Schuckman and some others. And actually, about 4 or 5 years ago, I decided I wanted to really return to Zen practice. I had done it since the start, so it's been almost 50 years for me. And then I also spent about 5 years in the Tibetan practice, really doing Dzogchen practice. The Rigpa practice was what I focused on. I had a couple of teachers willing to teach that. And then I got involved in the Theravadan, which is the traditional school of Buddhism, and practiced and completed all the samatha practices. There's about 30 or 40 meditations. And I worked with a teacher, Paul Snyder, who is at the time, and I would imagine still today, is considered one of the meditation masters in Theravada. Very, very hard grader. And he was very exacting, very demanding at the time. But I learned the practices and really went through sort of revolutionary life changes as a result of that. I did a 2-month retreat with him, and very, very intense, but just, again, life altering. But when I came back, I really wanted to get back into the Zen world, and it so happened that Sando Roshi wrote me, having read Buddha's Heart, one of my books, and we did a Zoom call. And as he said, the moment with the Zoom call opened, we both could feel the mind-to-mind transmission, and it's really like there's a shared consciousness, like we have a shared whiteboard we both can write on, is the simplest way to describe it. And every time we're together, it's that way, even now. So it became clear we had a connection. And I just told him, I really want to complete my Zen training. I've done, decades of practice, but I'd like to really complete it. And so we decided to do that. And so I did Dharma transmission, or we did it together, is really what it is. But I mean, that time, it was 3 years we did it. And that was probably the richest 3 years of my practice history. It was so alive, and we went through all the formal koans. I completed formal koan study, and then did the other teachings and practices, and it was really rich. I learned a tremendous amount and changed, and I have great love for Sando Roshi and respect, and it's a great gift to meet your teacher and to be able to feel that deep empowerment, and connecting into the Maizumi Roshi lineage was really a great place for me to be, because Maizumi was one of the rare teachers who received Dharma transmission in both the Rinzai, which is principally koan practice, and the Soto Zen, which is chiefly Shikantaza practice. And so in his lineage, we received both the Soto and Rinzai. And I find the koan practice really was enlivening. Each koan that's resolved, there's a bit of a mini kensho or awakening that happens. And particular koans will address different aspects. Some will teach how to talk from awakening. Some will teach how to function from awakening, and on and on. And so I view our realization, our consciousness, like a Asian fan, a hand fan. And each time we do a little practice, we're opening one more of the little sections of the fan, and we just keep opening and opening and opening. So it ends up being really a great practice and great learning. And I still have that when Sando Roshi and I teach together. I still learn a lot, and in our interactions, there's a lot that can be gained. But we're also now Dharma brothers and peers as well. So it's a cool relationship. Anyway, I'm very happy with it. And also I really am a strong advocate for koan practice. I don't give it to people. The students have to ask for it, which I think is also a little different way to approach it. So my teaching, I'll say the last thing, is really a combination of the Theravadan, which I was authorized the Theravadan teacher by PAWOK in 2007. And then also with the Zen, I do a kind of a hybrid where I do a lot of the Brahma Viharas, the heart practices, and then I focus a lot on awakening, which is what I see my calling as a teacher, is to bring the heart practices and rigorous awakening to teaching and to students.
Wonderful. Thank you both for sharing your rich backgrounds, and I can feel the love that you share together. So that's also wonderful to see. I mean, sometimes when teachers meet, there's friction. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to see. Well, the opposite of friction between two teachers who then teach each other.
Well, and I'll say Sando Roshi had no hesitation in kicking my ass when it was warranted. So don't be fooled that he's not. He's perfectly ready to pick up the stick and at least let me see it, if not let me experience it directly, as he should.
This guy's a master, Winston. Don't worry, he can handle himself.
Oh no, I'm not worried.
He's reflecting, so when he pounces, you won't see it coming.
So we've touched on a lot of what I had written down to cover already. But for those who don't know, just foundationally, what is a koan, and where did that come from within the Zen tradition?
You want that, Roshi?
Want me to say?
Sure.
You can say it as well, but I'd like to. I like to go back to my friend David Hinton's work here. David is, I guess, the premier translator of Chinese poetry and Buddhist texts in the West in our current day, and he's translated the koans in ways that are quite different from what we were raised with in the Japanese school. So I'm going to kind of start with what a koan is. And they started out as dialogues between people training together, teachers, I guess, and students, but just colleagues training together, often out in the mountains in China somewhere, and testing each other's understanding and being as dedicated as they could be to this practice. And also probably then doing some kind of very hard physical labor to support themselves in the early days, and then later having patrons, of course. But in China having, it seems like continual boom and bust periods. Tu Fu is walking around, the greatest of the Chinese poets is walking around on the edge of a society that's collapsing. So what came from those dialogues and the things that were transmitted to us, including the poetry, was this very, very powerful sense of what it is to be alive. And that material was collected both by Chinese and Japanese teachers, primarily Chinese in the early days. And then there are, so almost all of those koans, all of those teaching stories are of Chinese origin. But then the Japanese had a very particular way of both translating and teaching them, carrying them, passing them on. And there also are Korean koans, right? There's Korean lineages as well. I'm not sure if I answered exactly what it is. It's two people meeting and trying to point to the absolute reality together. Or sometimes if someone is too full of it and pointing to the absolute, like they own it, the other teacher's got to point the other way. Or sometimes there's a student who gets caught between the two of them or three of them. So, but they're all meant to be lived, right? They're just pointers.
Yeah.
And that's the difficulty with doing koan study is you can't just go in and repeat what you read. You have to show it. And you can't show it to someone who already is realized or awakened and get away with it.
No.
It's just obvious. No. Right? So it's tough. Kind of tough. Tough stuff. And then, by the way, you can pass through all these koans, as I said earlier, and they continue to come back and challenge, right? Because you're never done as long as you're in a body. You're not done.
Yeah. As long as you're breathing. Not done. Not yet.
As long as you're breathing. No, I mean, yeah, some of my teachers have been, I've often say this about Francis. Francis is he's truly just an enlightened being, but he's still in a body. He can still get, I'm saying this with very great, I don't want to say this, we're on a public thing here, but he can have a reaction that's a human reaction to something. And that's what makes it so wonderful to work with someone who is both very, very clear and also still in the body. It's not, we can talk to spirits, but it's not the same thing. If that makes sense.
Does. Did you want to add anything, Stephen, about what a koan is there?
Yeah. The one of the things that's always been impressive to me is when these koans were collected, which was about the 6th or 7th century in China, it was a particularly ripe period for Chan, for awakening. And there were some amazing teachers of the day that were very deeply realized and had the ability, they had the razor's edge ability to split hairs that the students had, issues they had, in a way that was provocative and would lead to sparking students into awakening, which, like, I'm in my teaching, I offer koans, so if people want to do it, they can ask for it, but it's not something required of anybody. And I think the self-selection makes a difference. But the koans, as Sando Roshi was saying, to me, one of the most important aspects is, if you're working a koan, is to be able to inhabit the consciousness of each of the participants to the koan. So in the traditional first koan of Mu, you have a student and you have Master Joshu. And the student, in my mind, is feeling insecure, having self-doubt, and wondering whether, in fact, they have the capacity to be realized, awakened, and what we call Buddha nature. And so what happened is they're walking, he sees a stray dog walking by and says to Joshu, "Does that dog have Buddha nature?" And of course, in all of Buddhism, every sentient being has the ability to be a fully realized Buddha. And Joshu, to his credit, says, "Wu," which means not, nothing, or no. So he says the exact opposite of what this kid's looking for. And of course, put this kid into a tailspin. How can that be possible? This awakened master is saying, "Nope, not that one." And that's what starts the koan for us all. So we all know the student's perspective. We all know that one well, that, I can't tell you how many times I've heard students on retreat say to me, "Well, I know everybody else here is probably awakened and awakening except me. I'm the worst one here," and I'll hear that again and again. So it's a common, self-doubt is a common issue. In my teaching, I also emphasize teaching about doubt. In Theravada Buddhism, they view 3 kinds of doubt: doubt in the teacher, teaching, and oneself. So I have students track this during retreat on a 1 to 10 scale. Where are you in terms of trusting me as a teacher, the teaching, and yourself? Because I'm finding that those that are having the Kensho, the awakenings, when I ask them after the Kensho, where are you on this scale, they're typically all at 10s or almost. So the trust has to be really high too. And the self-doubt is the biggest impediment, in my view, of why people don't have Kensho more readily. There also is a maturing that goes on too, but at least that self-doubt really gets in the way.
Yeah. Well, to everyone listening, you can do it.
Absolutely.
Not only you can do it, you've already got it. You just have to realize it, right?
Yeah, you're not getting something from somewhere else. It's already in your consciousness. It has to be, because it's unconditioned. It can't be anywhere else but here.
Got to give you a Daido Roshi for, how we used to say, which is, we need to have great faith, great doubt, and great determination. And those are the pillars of Zen. The 3 pillars.
Yep. Tripod. You don't have one, falls over.
Yeah. And yet you already have it, right? So you already have what you're seeking.
Takes a lot of work to figure that out. Speaking of, for most people.
Yeah.
Stop the figuring out. Stop the figuring out is a good way to put it. Yeah. Stop figuring it out. Just relax. Let it go. Sit there. we're naturals at this. It's just I always have to hold my phone up. It's gotten worse and worse and worse. It's just this whole idea that there's some secret knowledge that you have to get, and it's about information, and the masters didn't have all those distractions that we have. The impediments,
Nope.
the AI, all of that stuff, completely useless. Sorry to put it so bluntly, but
No, I mean for this it is. I mean, I don't have any disagreement there. I doubt Stephen does.
no. One might argue that, any devices are ultimately impediments.
Devices of words, devices of technology, any devices, any artifice, any fabrication.
Yeah, anything other than sitting quietly with your own being is a distraction until you work through that. And it just, you're putting your mind into things that are in the wrong. They're pointing the wrong way. They're pointing out.
Yeah.
It's like that old story of the philosophy professor coming to have tea with the master, and the master poured the cup and it's overflowing. And the professor's, my cup's overflowing. And the teacher says, yeah, well, you must empty your cup before you can fill it.
Right,
and that's what we're saying. But we're fairly stubborn at keeping our cup full of concepts and identities.
No, that's a foundation of security, a familiarity.
Yeah.
It's hard to let go.
Well, right. It's social comfort. If everybody is here, this is how we fit in. And we're pack animals, so we want to fit in.
Mm.
I think the koan study is extremely relevant for today also. As I said, with my teaching, I leave it for students to ask to start koan practice. And I just have a growing number of students who are doing it. And a fair number are completing Mu and going on from there. But also my teaching, one of the differences in my teaching is I do these guided meditations, guiding the group into direct contact with the absolute, which is the source of all manifestation and creation. And that seems to be one of the primers for folks working the koan. It seems to be in relation to the guided meditations, will often be a precursor to the Kensho. So I think there's lots of ways that as a teacher, we're also demonstrating, resonating, sitting in the seat of the absolute for our students. And that's part of what sparks them when they're ripe.
Monkey see, monkey do. I mean, that's the benefit of working with a teacher, right? A lot of people think they can go and do it all on their own from books or what they read online, but I mean, maybe.
I don't think so. I think there's, I've been practicing almost 50 years and teaching almost 20, and I have a renewed appreciation for residential retreat, in-person retreat. There's nothing that tops us being in the same field together day after day. We change.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was going to, even on top of that, Mugen, I was going to say that if you're in the field with someone who, as in Mugen's case, is a very deeply realized being, you will benefit from that. You will benefit on a level that's beyond thought and beyond your own doubts. And it's not a guru worship thing. It's not like, gee, I now need to follow this person around. But just think about if I pick up a book, one of David's translations of the Mugen or the Blue Cliff Record. As I hold the book, I feel reverence. I feel the absolute, the presence, and also the infinite, the absence. I feel all of that resonating from this book. How is that, right? I'm not even reading the book. I'm just holding it. I feel that way when I hold any holy book. it's a beautiful reminder of to have reverence for this life. It's not something we're going to get, right? The more we humble ourselves and the more we allow ourselves to feel what's already here, the deeper we go. It's that basic. Of course, I'm a
Yeah,
felt experience kind of student and teacher, so I don't. Well, go ahead. Sorry, Sensei, you were going to say.
I was going to say about 20 years ago, I think I had this great revelation that most of the prior 30 years of practice had been learning to get out of my own way and,
Right.
and put down my beliefs and opinions and convictions. And once I realized that's what I was doing, it went a lot better. But that's a lot of it. It's recognizing who we take ourselves to be, and there's a lot of honesty in this practice. We have to be honest about where we are, what our beliefs are, where our hangups are, where our self-doubt is. We've got to work these issues because we can't get into the deep material. Because in my teaching, we also work the personal material. We don't work it therapeutically, but we work it spiritually, recognizing patterns. Why do you have that pattern? What is it serving? Is it true for you? Or is it simply a familiar social or cultural norm you've adopted? So part of it, in a lot of ways, as Zen practitioners, we're extremely radical because we're choosing to sit outside the dominant culture in a way that we're unaffected by the dominant culture. And that's potent when there are people that don't buy into all that's being presented of this is how life is. And we're saying maybe not.
Against the stream of human society, as Buddha said. Against the stream.
We can watch it all day long, no problem.
So we've talked a little bit about what koan is, why it's important, and how it can come to fruition a bit, and some other aspects to it. But okay, so someone watching this might be wondering, okay, well, how do you actually practice it? Like mu, or the sound of the one hand, or your original face, or who am I? Well, okay, how? What? what are you actually doing, or not doing?
Yeah, do you mind if I jump in, Roshi?
Oh, I'd love to have you do that. Thanks.
The way that I recommend taking on, for example, mu is the nearly 100% typical first koan. And I tell folks, first you want to treat it as a mantra. You want to be repeating the mu. The traditional instruction is on the in-breath, we silently say, what is it? And on the out-breath, mu. And we keep that going until we can keep mu on the tip of our breath. And then every breath is mu. Your life becomes mu. And you start peeling away the layers, the social layers, the personality layers. And the big thing this is doing too is it's anytime the student is coming in, they're mostly going to give conceptual answers at first. And the teacher is not going to accept a conceptual answer. As Sando Roshi said, it's not what is it? It's really show me. So there may be an explanation, which is fine, but there has to be the show me part, and that's really the advanced stage. So once they have it as a mantra, once they're holding it, then they want to practice and stay with it as much as they can 24/7, and you just stay with it and with it and with it. And hopefully working with a teacher, because the teacher can help by eliminating any guesses or answers that aren't full enough or aren't the bullseye. We can keep them going. And all the while, they're peeling back the layers of me. They're getting more and more in touch with who they are as an unconditioned entity rather than a conditioned person. So it's doing a lot of work and a lot of good. But this is where also, to me, you've got to include the heart practices, the Brahma Viharas, because there is a lot of suffering that we all have experienced in life. We have to have a way to meet that suffering, to meet the unpleasant memories, the difficulties, the dysfunctions that we all learn. So at the same time, we're also, in my eyes, we're also perfecting the vessel that's going to hold the absolute, that's going to hold the Dharma. And we do that by working the personal material as it comes up, which it will. It's you can't do this practice without including all of you. You've got to put, this is poker, you got to put in every chip that you have, even ones you don't have. You can't hold back if you're going to do this practice. You've got to surrender your whole life.
Die on the spot. Great death. I mean, they call it that for a reason.
You got to be willing. You've got to be willing.
Yeah. You have to be willing, but you can't will it to happen.
No.
Right. So that's why
we offer ourselves surrender. Again and again.
Just offering.
Open-hearted surrender with no guile.
Yeah. That's where that reverence comes in, that sense of reverence for this life. If you think it's about a person or somebody else has got it, you're making an object of your life. But when you learn to really revere this miracle that we're living in, it changes. It really then things really can change.
And awakening is.
Excuse me. No, sorry.
I was just going to say,
not done.
And I was just going to say, awakening is incredibly transformative. It isn't, people will say, I have people who come for interviews and will decide they've had an awakening here, an awakening there. And sometimes they've had glimpses of things, but often they've had a transcendent experience. And they're putting a lot of meaning into it, where we can have lots of transcendent experiences, but the awakening is very particular. What it is, what it does, and then we can recognize it in others. When there's deep enough awakening in one consciousness, it resonates when someone comes in, and when they're presenting, it resonates in you what's going on with them in a way that there's complete intimacy. And it's out of great love that we tell them no, and we push them back into the Zendo to sit more. But for me, there needs to be three components for an awakening. There needs to be a very deep experience of absence of self, what traditionally is called no self. There needs to be a very deep experience of unity, of love. Everything is the same fabric of oneness, including me. And there has to be the recognition, this is who I truly am. This is my true identity. Unless you have all three, then to me, it's not a Kensho. It's not an awakening. It can be a no-self experience. It can be a unity experience. But you need both. You need the spark of both for it to be an awakening.
Laughing, crying, dancing for joy. That kind of immensity. Not necessarily.
Maybe.
I mean, it could be quiet.
It happens sometimes, and sometimes not. But it's, we all have our own reaction to it. Usually, the laughing and crying is because, oh my God, it was here all the time.
How could I miss it?
I've been looking for my head, and it's on my shoulders. It's kind of one of those moments.
Embarrassingly often, more than once, I've been looking for my glasses all around my apartment, and I realize, oh.
Yeah. Welcome to aging.
No. Don't get us started with them. I got a couple senior citizens here. But it can also be, it can be so simple that, it's just a slipping away. It doesn't have to be a dramatic fireworks either.
No, I mean, those are temporary and meaningless.
And what you need in that moment. Well, they're important because they keep us in practice. They also show us that there is. Yeah.
I said meaningless. Maybe that was too harsh. They are temporary and not the thing.
Yeah. They keep us in practice. And it also gives you faith that there's more here than meets the eye. This is not people often think that Zen is just a bunch of wordplay. It's just a game. And if you get the words right, you've got it. And that's not what's happening. There is transcendent spiritual experience that happens. And that's, that's what we're pointing to here. So it's not a game. It's a great brand for every product you can name now. Zen this and then that, Zen that.
Zen, yeah.
But it's no more meaningful than your phone, right? To say that when it's your life on the line and you realize who you are for real, and this often happens when people come to death, and they come to death and maybe they survive it. It changes them. You hear a lot of people talking about that. So there are ways it happens that are without any training even, right? It just happens to us because it's already what we are, right? So something shocks us out of it, out of the illusion that we have. And you can fall back into it because you can have a bad day and get mad about something and you can forget suddenly. And that's why you get back on your cushion and why every good teacher sits every day and practices every day, because we're still embodied, right? The whole subject of how teachers get themselves in trouble, it's because they stop bringing themselves to the absolute every day, bringing themselves home, right? I'm not saying you're going anywhere, but coming home to what we are and surrendering ourselves to that, humbling ourselves to what we actually are, and putting aside all the opinions and biases and all the daily stuff we get into. So humility is a good sign of a teacher,
I think too
Not
that
everyone, I'm not saying, but it's how you kind of get to it. Sorry, Stephen.
I think it's important also that as a teacher that you work with other teachers, meaning you and I work together still too. We get on calls, we'll work on different issues, we'll work on things together. So you have somebody you're working with who's also slightly tracking, who can say, you're stepping off here, you're missing the mark. So that's important too, rather than to say, I'm done. And that's where the seduction of the students projecting their idealization onto the teacher, you have to let them do it, but you can't own it because it's not real. It's their image, and they need the image as a raft of sorts. But as a teacher, you can't hold it that way. You're still a practitioner. So you have to let them project without owning the projection. And that's the problem as teachers that get in trouble. They begin to own the projection and they think they're all that. And, none of us is. So that's important. But really awakening, one of the important ways to view it is it's a ripening. And like fruit ripening on the tree, we can't hasten it. We can't rush it. We have to just let it ripen. And as Sandra Roshi was saying, there's times when the fruit is going to fall off the tree on its own. And other times the skilled picker knows exactly when. The mother chick and the chick know when to peck on the egg at the same time for it to open. That's what the good teacher can do.
It's a lovely metaphor. Lovely metaphor. I remember reading that from Hakuin. I'm not sure where he got it from. Maybe he came up with it, or he just took it from somewhere else. But absolutely,
he
pecking from
borrowed
the
it
inside,
from
pecking
me.
from the outside.
Yeah, he borrowed it from me. That's what I think, anyway.
I remember trying to answer Moo using that with Daido Roshi once. It didn't go very far.
I'm ready. Heck me. I'm ready.
How did I end up outside?
ring, 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 ring.
Yeah, the trap door opened and away you went.
Working on Moo. By the way, Moo is also the endless koan, right? It's another thing that teachers will tell you. They'll get any good Zen teacher on this podcast, and they'll say, Moo is the endless koan. It's the only one you need in a sense, right?
Well, I was on retreat last week, and I was told directly that in pretty much those words. Yeah. No matter the attainment, now ever for anyone, it is never sufficient. And Moo, you will never exhaust it. Never.
Well, you can't exhaust the absolute. No matter how much we practice, we'll never completely penetrate all of the mystery. So none of us is ever going to be done. And that's part of the humility and modesty that Sando Roshi was talking about.
Vast and boundless, reaching everywhere. Try to use Daidoshi's voice.
I like that.
Yeah, you have these things that stick with you, you know. So it's a practice of essences in some ways, or the essence. I really do think there's a big, because my practice has been so much about felt experience that I feel like I have to say this sometimes. When we say it's not in your head, then people don't know where to look. What does that
Well,
mean?
is it in my body? Is it in my hand?
Yeah, and it's that you have the ability to quiet yourself and to see what you actually are, what we are. And sometimes the way to do that, a way to do that is to feel it, right? Sink into your body, sink into the hara, below your navel, right? Sink into the heart, right? Go up to the crown chakras. Mugen and I do this a lot. In some of the trainings we've done, we will traditionally you would just sit in the hara in a Zen center. Mugen, who's been trained in many other disciplines, and as I keep saying, this guy's a serious master, will use other modalities, right? And I've trained in a couple myself, and it seems like we sometimes end up converging on this of moving through the body. You can't see the body here, but below the belly, the big heart chakra, coming up to the crown, and realizing that you're not limited by the body. Also, right? The body's your home, but you're not limited by it. It takes it completely out of thoughts and notions, and you can feel the energy align in that system. And the energy itself, that's not an awakening. It's just a realization of you are not a limited being. Right? You are already unlimited. We always say you're already enlightened. That's usually a license for people to go do stupid things. But what you are, what we are, is that which is the enlightened. And we're just trying to release our attachments to the little self. My little body is limited. My little mind is limited. My little phone told me today what I should think. That kind of stuff. And that's what we're trying to do. And the more you can incorporate your whole being, not only, I think, the deeper you can go, but your life's better. You can have a happier life. You can have a better life. This doesn't have to be so hard. It doesn't. Life does deliver a lot of blows. We are mortal. We get sick. We can die easily. But we don't have to dwell there. Right? There's a lot of.
That's not all we are.
No, I mean, it's not all we are.
That's part of the condition. That's part of the conditioned truth. But part of what we're tapping into is what's unconditioned. And that's really an important distinction. For me, that's why I work the personal material with people, because you have to work the patterns, the convictions, the beliefs, because that's what keeps the sense of self in place. And we have to look at those with the compass of truth and say, is it true? Do I really need to behave in this way? Do I really need this certain position or idea or dogmatic allegiance? And we slowly begin to unplug from those and realize what's true and what's not true. So we're liberating all these self-beliefs along the way. And ultimately, the final issue that we work in the third awakening, level of awakening called Daigotete, which means full or final enlightenment, is we resolve the core wound. And that's the primary dysfunction we all carry, that if you asked people secretly, what's the worst thing you think about yourself? And that would be the core wound. I'm bad, I'm unlovable, I'm broken, I'm worthless. and they believe it with complete conviction. But we can't move into it directly. We have to start with the streams that come off of the main river and work those. Then we can get to where we're working the river. I have a couple students that are at that point. They're working the core wound now. And it's really fascinating to watch and to support that as it resolves little by little by little, where they have times when they have no sense of self at all. They're just functioning in the world. And that's the start of it, because with Daigo Teite realization, the sense of self falls away forever. And so it just begins a matter of working without necessarily being a particular person, not knowing how people view us, not trying to fit a certain image or behave a certain way. We're just simply meeting truth as best we can in each moment. And also understanding we're never going to fully exhaust the storehouse consciousness, the alaya vijnana, the eighth consciousness of Yogacara Buddhism, because we have these buja, the seeds of karmic seeds. And even though we can drop the sense of self permanently, the seeds still need purification. So as Sando Roshi was saying, there can still be reactivity to what's going on. Even though there isn't really a self that's reacting, there's a habituated karmic pattern being revealed. So rather than deny it and bypass by going to the absolute, we engage those when they come up and we work them. And we treat them as, this is an issue of my practice. It's ready, it's ripe, that's why it's here. And that's important to hold, that these issues come up not because we're doing it wrong, but because we're ready to take them on. We're ready to meet them. And we're willing to bring that compass of truth and say, I want to know the truth. If I'm really unlovable and worthless, then I want to know. I want to confirm it. Then I can say, okay, great. I can hold this with complete abandon because it's true. But they run the risk of finding out it's not true. It's just a belief.
Yeah.
Better ask a question, Winston, because we can keep going like this. No, you should ask a question because we can keep going.
Oh, I should ask a question.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I've just been letting you guys run, which has been great.
We kind of talk like this when we're with each other too. There's a little more. How's your family? And how the students.
Yeah, and we're both old guys. We're both old guys, so we have the grandkid and the technology discussion. Do you know how to make this work or that work? No. Yeah. I only see half your face in this picture.
There's that, or I hope I don't need surgery for this now, but that's part of it.
Yeah, regrettably, technology. Yeah. I was going to say, regrettably, having an awakening doesn't improve your technological ability.
No. And when you go to the doctor, it doesn't mean that if you're eating bad food, it's still going to get you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The conditioned world is always the conditioned world.
Yeah. No getting away from birth, aging, old age, sickness, and death in those conventional terms.
Well, there is a way to get away from it. Most definitely.
You can get away from it, but if you come back, I still work a regular job, and I have all those same stresses, and I can't say I practice it perfectly. I'm very much in the world.
But you're also looking for opportunities to bring in the lens, the compass of truth to your work. So that's a distinction.
Yes.
When you said there's a way to bring it to an end, were you pointing there to our hot ship and the complete cutting of the cycle for good?
No, because as Mahayana practitioners, we take the Bodhisattva vow to save all beings. So that means that we're going to commit to being reborn until all beings are across the river. And so there's no, but what I'm saying is that there can be sufficient awakeness that the awakeness can continue lifetime to lifetime. It doesn't mean the new entity, the new human is going to be awake at birth, but it means that the ripeness is there already. That's why you have characters like the Dalai Lama and Panchen Lama, where they can be reborn, and with a little bit of practice, they can remember what they realized in prior lifetimes. And that's possible for all of us. I'm seeing that. So that's, in Buddhism, we call that the Vajra body, the diamond body.
I don't know what people listening to this will make of that kind of thing. People have differing opinions. Myself, I can only say I don't know.
Yep. Well, you don't know until you do. So that's the way to hold it. But it's possible to know.
Well, I will hold that lightly until there's certainty. Mark, you were going to say something.
No, I was probably going to say something that I shouldn't say.
Well, what? No. Well, maybe you should say it. What is it?
Well, I was going to make a joke. I had an opening experience when I was 8 years old, and a very profound one. And I was a complete nervous jerk in high school and well into my 20s, and my wife would probably say to this very day. So I don't know, because I can't remember anything before that, but I certainly recognize the absolute when it appeared, and never lost the path.
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean anything. I'm just a regular guy, man. I'm just working a job. I got a family, and so we all have it, right? We all have it.
Yeah.
Everyone has this already. And the experiences and
practice confirms.
Just kind of straightened me out enough. Just kind of straightened me out enough that I would stay in practice, but it didn't make me better than the other kids in the third grade. You know what I mean? Or now.
It probably did.
Oh, right. Yeah. If you probably could wait in line for the water fountain a little easier than the others, I'm guessing. God, what a kid actually, this wasn't the same event, but a kid right around that time was really bugging me. And I ended up punching him. And then I turned myself in because I had hurt somebody. And then I've never swung at somebody in anger. I had plenty of anger, but I've never actually gone after somebody the whole rest of my life. And I assume that's an okay thing, but I mean, it's just what it was. I didn't, I just look at these things in retrospect and kind of realize that there was some guidance there.
Yeah.
Right. And I bet if you looked at every single one of us, the light shines for every single one of us. And if we just pay a little more attention to it, you realize the universe is helping you all along the way, every single being. And we just have to recognize it and then say, I don't want to act the other way. And it doesn't mean that I don't still act a bad way. Sometimes I get upset about stuff very much, right? Because I care about things. I care about the world and I get upset. But then I can't stay there. I can't stay there in that upset.
Yeah.
I have to come back every morning.
Flows through.
Every morning, come back, wake up. I wake up to the day and I sit right up. I don't go for a cushion or anything. I just sit right up in bed. So there's no gap. And I sit. I just sit there. Sit shikantaza, right? I just sit there. And I'm glad that the universe is allowing me that time to be alive. And then all the stuff starts. Kids, the grandkids, the work, all that stuff. We all have it. But I make sure that a day doesn't pass where I'm not entering into the absolute and feel that reverence and gratitude for this life. It's that simple, man. It's not, that simple.
Beautiful. Well, I think we're coming about to an hour here. There were some audience questions. Maybe we could go through them kind of quickly. This is kind of an amusing question. How well could an AI answer koans?
As well as it can borrow from an actual answer and adapt it. So there are books out there, and on the internet there are people that put out different koan answers. But it's kind of like when I was young, I knew this guy who was a farmer, and he had these great sayings. And he would say in this instance, it's like kissing your best gal through a chicken wire fence. You can do it, but it's not very satisfying.
That's a
Yeah, I mean, regurgitating. It's just regurgitating.
Yeah,
What someone
and
else wrote. Dead words.
you can tell when they're dead words, exactly, when they're not live. Because particularly when you say "show me," when there's nothing on the internet that tells how you should show what Mu is. So that's where the proof in the pudding comes out.
Yeah. It's this phrase, the miracle of aliveness, right? The miracle of being alive. AI is, you can get into some intellectual notion that all things are created through the absolute. So AI is, the absolute. But that's not what we're talking about. We are human. We have a very particular, I was going to say, purpose for being alive, and an opportunity to experience the greatest beauty and the greatest sorrow for ourselves. And we have to do all of it, right? That's what being alive is. And a machine cannot experience that for us. And therefore, stay the hell away from it, because it's just adding more delusion. There's nothing in it. And by the way, I work in the energy industry. You know how much energy it takes to run those data centers? Right? You can run
Tons.
whole countries on what it takes to run a data center. And who's benefiting? A few people at the top, not you. You're enslaving yourself. Here's a Bob Marley quote: "Free yourselves from mental slavery, because none but ourselves can know our mind." Okay? Stay there, guys. Audience. Seriously. Young people, live this life. Don't let somebody
There's
else
something about koan practice, as they say, when you're eyebrow to eyebrow with your teacher, was where it works. That's the alive part. And we're not going to get that with AI.
or
No.
even the damn phones or anything. That's why I held it up at the beginning. And I'm on this all day. I run a business. I'm on it all day. That is not what we're talking about when we talk about freeing your mind and living your life. I wish Steve and I lived before any of those devices.
Yeah.
Right? And we were very happy beings without them. Young people, take warning. Next question?
No, I mean, it's a... Yeah. take warning well. I'm quite a bit younger than you both, and I know in my own mind and body and heart the harm that is done by addiction to these devices.
Yeah.
It's really challenging. And of course, you read this, this stuff, that the younger folks also are getting to where they have a dopamine hit when the phone dings from social media. So there's getting an addiction actually to the phone, even though they find that people with the most Facebook friends are generally the most lonely and depressed. So it's a wide lake, but it's not deep. And that's what we're talking about, is depth. We don't need a whole lake to go deep on. We just need our spot.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right on.
Next question. I've read traditionally koan served as a verification of awakening. Now that texts are no longer secret, I guess they're talking about records, or maybe even, some answer books have been published. Those lineage documents have been leaked. Does koan practice have issues with people intellectually working their way around koans without getting real insight?
Have an issue with that? Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Simple answer.
If you're going to spend your life really trying to know yourself, to know your own mind, why would you cheat? Like, forget cheating. Why would you even take somebody else's answer? The question is, who are you in this very moment? Right? If you can't answer that, please find out for yourself. It's not in a book. Books can inspire you, but it is right here, right now, before your very eyes. It's you. It's in you. Bring it out. Bring it out. Okay? Don't chase shadows. Sorry, I got the Irish coming up a little bit.
No. That's good. I like the fire.
The koans can't be resolved through intellectualism or concept. And one of the other differences with Sando Roshi and I is we're both trained as lawyers. So we've had intellectual training, and we can guarantee you it doesn't help. We can analyze tremendously well, but in fact, I recently redrafted the precepts rather than prohibitive. I've drafted them as generative. And Sando Roshi and I were meeting for part of the Dharma transmission work. And so we went through these, and I had to laugh because we ended up being like two lawyers. We're like, well, what exactly does the word value mean? And we're like picking apart these words that we were picking for the precept, but we got laughing about it because it's like, well, regardless of the fact I haven't practiced law in 5 years, and you haven't really practiced in a while. Me do a little bit, but anyway, it just was funny. The training is still there.
Never goes away.
Splitting hairs, yeah.
Yeah, so we can tell people splitting hairs is not going to work.
No.
You have to be real.
It's not going to work.
No, you have to be real. It has to be your answer. One of my early Zen teachers used to yell at me, "You've got to chew it up, swallow it, and shit it out to have the answer." I was like, what? What am I eating? But there was still truth in what he said. I need to make it mine. Yeah. That's the thing.
Eating moo, shitting moo, walking moo. Yep.
That's all part of it.
This is a family program now. Let's not get too carried away.
I don't think it's a family program at all.
It's not a family program.
My grandkids will be goofing on this actually once I hear it. So.
Yeah, any family watching this should head straight to therapy, please.
Okay, final question from the audience that came in. This one is for Stephen, I think primarily. You already covered this a bit. Your experience with other lineages, traditions, and why you aren't teaching from them to limiting to Zen and Theravada. I don't know if that's actually true. Maybe you just don't advertise those other lineage backgrounds or in your teaching. Anyway, that's for you to answer.
Well, I've practiced in different traditions or different lineages within the Zen world. I practiced with some of the teachers from the Suzuki Roshi lineage, and I mentioned Korean Zen teachers, Son teachers, and Tibetan Buddhism. I've also spent quite a bit of time in the Diamond Heart, Hamid Ali and Karen Johnson presentation. And I did the teacher training, the 8-year seminary with that group, where I didn't become a teacher. But understanding the psychology and the personality really made a difference. To me, I'm only authorized in the two traditions, in Theravada and in the White Plum Zen. So that's what I teach. But I incorporate and I use everything. I'm really flexible, and whatever's going to work for the student. If I know their language, or if I know where they're coming from in terms of their background, then I'm going to try to use that language with them. For the Christians, I'll talk a lot about God and Jesus, love, and things like that. So you have to use what's at hand. That's really part of the job.
Yeah. Okay. That was the last question. The conclusion, which I have in my notes here, is where to learn more, or if people are interested in where to learn more, and if they're interested, if something in here resonates with something in your heart, in your mind, in your body, and you feel a call, what next? Where to go? What to do?
Well, the website awakeningdharma.org is the start, and then I'm on Instagram, and I've got a YouTube channel with a couple hundred videos on there that get added every few days. So if you want to see teaching, or I lead all sorts of meditations on there, that's one of the ways to go. There are videos of Sando Roshi also. He teaches with me some of the time. And I'm in the process of working with him, where I'm hoping that once he stops working, I can get him to also be able to teach the Brahma Viharas, the heart practices, because it's my hope that he and I can bring those more fully into the Zen lineage and be teaching those, where people can have those teachers and students can have them as a resource. Because we need lots of paintbrushes, in our kit, because meditation is an artistry, and we have to learn how to be artists in that way. And it requires a lot of paintbrushes, a lot of practices to do that effectively, in my opinion.
Wonderful. Mark, would you like to add anything?
I'm just, I appreciate your bringing us together, Wiston, and it's always a pleasure to be with my dear friend Mugen Sensei, and I hope the audience has had a good time or gotten something from it. So
We've had a
thanks for
good
joining.
time.
Time talking.
Maybe
But,
they do, maybe they don't. That's not our
yeah,
responsibility.
no, that's true. I guess I would say it's always in your hands, right? It's always in your hands.
Yeah.
We don't have anything that you already don't have. I would say that you already have, right? You already got it. Question is, do you want to really know it? Do you want to explore it? Do you want to really know yourself and then go beyond yourself? And that's the big question. That's the life's work. If you choose that, it ain't easy, but God, it's for when you once you do it, it's so rewarding, and it's becomes sort of. I'm hesitating because my family would say my family's first, okay, but in my own personal life, it's the most important thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
other, be, other than love my wife and my children and my grandchildren, right? That's I have to always put that first because I'm a layperson. I'm not a monk. But other than that, this work has enriched my life in ways that I'll always be grateful.
If I can add one last thing, Wiston, and that's,
Of course,
you know,
yeah.
folks, if the flame is lit, it's lit. Once it's lit, then it's going to keep burning. So you'll do yourself a favor if you find a teacher you resonate with and a teacher you trust, then, you know, enter, put yourself in, be willing to practice and go and do it. Because if the flame is lit, you're not going to be able to deny that. And it's just going to create more suffering as long as you're not pursuing it. So recognize where you are and follow the flame.
Right on. And know the universe is watching you, trying to lead you home, man. It's trying
Yeah.
to lead you home. It's not fake. It's actually real. But you got to find it yourself. Right? So as Mugen saying, you find a teacher like him and you like him, go run. Go find the teacher. You're not giving your own life up. You're finding your life when you do that.
One of my teachers said, "Don't you want to know?"
Oh, that's so good. That's great.
And then ring, ring, ring. No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good.
There's a good teacher.
Oh man.
So
okay.
Well,
thanks for having us. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Wisdom.
No, thank you both so much for coming.
Our pleasure. Be well, everybody.
Okay.